If pumping hurts or your milk supply is low, your pump size might be wrong. And 9 times out of 10, you don't even know that's the problem. In this video, I'm going to share a few tips to help you know if you are using the right flange size for your pump. There's a lot of advice out there on flange sizing, and most of it is not that great. So hopefully this video will help you troubleshoot a little bit and find yourself a more comfortable flange. Because in my experience as a lactation consultant who specializes in pumping, having the right flange size can make a world of difference. Before we get started though, I would love for you to grab my free pumping starter kit. It also includes a pump comparison guide, so if you haven't picked out a pump or you're in the market for a new one, it'll help you pick that as well. That's in the description below for the video. There's a lot of talk about flange size in the breastfeeding community, and for good reason. For years and years, there has been no research behind flange sizes, and most people were using a 24 or 28. However, over the past few years, there has been good research and clinical evidence to support using flange sizes that are more similar to your actual nipple diameter. This isn't always about using a smaller flange, but using one that your body actually reacts well to and is fit well for. With that said, most moms I work with are using a flange size between 14 and 17, but that doesn't mean you can't be a larger size. It just means that simply measuring or picking the flange that came with your pump probably isn't the most effective way to know what your flange size is. Here are the most common signs that your pump flange might be incorrect. First and foremost, pain. If you are uncomfortable at all, it could be your pump, but more often than not, it's going to be your flange size. Often people will be like, oh, it hurts, and so I'm going to go up in size. But I find that often it is actually the opposite that should be happening, that you are almost to that right flange size, and going down a little bit will help with that pain. If you have any damage, if you have vasospasms where your nipples are turning colors or they're painful after you pump, you feel like they're pinched or they are just really uncomfortable, definitely get a flange sizing. Even if you feel like you have had someone tell you what flange size you are, I would say 9 times out of 10, the moms I work with say, oh, I did a flange sizing, and then we do an actual flange sizing, and their flange is a completely different size than they thought. A flange is going to fix every problem with pain out there. There are some moms I've worked with where it has been very difficult to find the right combination of flange and flange type. But for most moms, I find that it is a pretty easy fix once you try out the actual flanges. Another sign that your flange is not incorrect is if you are having your entire areola or even some of your breast tissue going into the flange. Prior to what people have said in the past, what we really want to see is just your nipple going in and out of the flange. Like the nipple doesn't go all the way out, but it should be gliding easily. It shouldn't look stuck, but you also shouldn't be having your areola and your breast being pulled in. The nipple actually can touch the sides of the tunnel right here as long as it's comfortable for you and it doesn't feel like it's causing excess pain. You can and often should have the nipple touching the sides. This can help to increase oxytocin, and it's very similar to the nipple touching the hard palate of your baby's mouth. Again, this goes against what many lactation consultants have believed over the years. I was taught in my training that none of the nipples should ever touch the sides and that you should always go up and get bigger and bigger with the flange. This is not true. I don't see this clinically in my experience, and the research out there doesn't support this as well. With that said, if your nipple is stuck in here, it's not moving at all, that is also a sign that your flange size is incorrect. Another sign to look for is that you are getting strong sprays of milk. There are some situations where you are not going to be getting strong sprays of milk, especially if it's colostrum and it's more dripping, or you have very low milk supply. However, I have seen a huge correlation with the right flange size and sprays of milk. Sometimes I'll have a mom that's, oh, this is really comfortable, but I'm not seeing sprays. So we play around a little bit, we change the flange, and they start to see sprays, and it is an amazing thing. It is one of my favorite things to see actual sprays of milk coming out of the nipple when someone is pumping. A lot of people focus on what breast pump they have, which there is merit in that. There are a lot of bad breast pumps out there, and it's important to get one that is going to work well for your body and your situation. With that said, I often find that the flange size can be more important than the pump itself for your milk efficiency. It's going to help with your overall output, your long-term efficiency and comfort, and just make pumping a better experience overall. I actually work with a lot of moms that will say, oh, pumping is fine, like it doesn't hurt. And I'm like, well, why don't we just try a flange size, especially when I see that they're using a 24. Almost always they say, wow, I had no idea what I was putting up with and that I actually was uncomfortable and in pain. It never ceases to amaze me how many moms will say, oh my gosh, this looks so different than pumping was before, because they're used to their whole breast being pulled into that flange. Especially when you have a smaller flange size like 13 or 15, a 24 or 28 is going to be way too large. I've also found that having the right pump flange size can truly make or break your pumping journey. I have had moms in my office in tears because they have bloody nipples, pumping is miserable, they're hardly getting any milk, or it's taking them 30 to 45 minutes to get the amount of milk that they need. However, when we switch them to the right flange, all of a sudden, it's like the floodgates are opened, their milk comes out faster, it's so much more efficient, and most importantly, it's comfortable. I've had these moms reach out to me months later telling me that they were about to throw in the towel, and that simply changing their flange size made a world of difference. So let's talk a little bit about getting the right flange size. I go into this in depth in my guide called the Pumping Playbook, which also includes fuss-free flange fitting, which you can check out the link for that below. This will go against what so many people say and what I used to say. Measuring is really not the most efficient way to figure out what your flange size is, especially with these circle rulers. We are generally going to be measuring the nipple tip, and these rulers are going to be measuring the base. Even if you do get your nipple in here right, which most of the time, most moms are not going into the right size because they think it can't touch the sides, you may or may not get the right measurement because the base of the nipple is wider than the tip. With all that said, even when I measure the tip, I don't find that to be as efficient as actually trying the flanges. I really believe that the best way to find the right flange is to try different sizes and different shapes so you can see what your body responds to, how it feels, and the differences between them. A lot of times I'll have a mom try a flange in my office and she's like, oh, that feels pretty good. And then I put another one on and she's like, oh my gosh, that is so much better. And you really can't do that with measuring. I would say most of the moms that I work with virtually, especially, or that come into my office that have measured previously, are usually about 5 millimeters off from what their flange size actually is. Of course, this can be expensive and to try so many different flanges. So if you can find someone in person to test flanges with you, that's a great option. I will link to a directory below of people that are skilled in this area because there really are a lot of lactation consultants that aren't. If you're in the Denver area, be sure to book a consult with my team. We do office and home visits, and all of my team knows how to fit flanges. I do also do virtual flange sizings. They are a little bit more cost prohibitive because you have to order the flanges yourself, but there are a few options out there available. I also want to touch on using inserts. Most of the time, I do not recommend inserts, especially if you're using a traditional breast pump like a Spectra, Baby Buddha, etc. However, if you're using a wearable pump, you really have no other option but to use inserts for a smaller flange size. What I recommend is finding the right size in your traditional pump and then using those in your wearable pump. It's really hard to see what your nipple looks like in most wearable pumps out there, and so this is a good option for making that work a little bit better. And there are lots of different flange types and sizes out there. I go into this more in depth in the Pumping Playbook. I like the pano. That is what I use for most moms. There's also the crater. There's the traditional shape, which I rarely use. And there's also silicone flanges. Silicone flanges are very popular on Instagram. And for some moms, they can be effective. If you have truly elastic nipples where you have been sized, you have tried all the different sizes, and your nipples are still very elastic and it's uncomfortable, I do sometimes find silicone flanges to be helpful. However, for most moms, I don't find that you need to use a silicone flange in order to pump efficiently and comfortably. I hope this has helped you figure out if your flange size is incorrect or not. My team does offer one-on-one consults worldwide and here in the Denver area, as well as in Somerville, South Carolina, and we would love to work with you. We do work with a lot of different insurances and can do virtual flange sizings. I also have a virtual flange sizing option that is done through Messenger, and so if you're interested in that, you can reach out to my team and we can get you scheduled for that. You can also DIY it with the Pumping Playbook, which includes the fuss-free flange sizing guide, which I've linked below. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you can find the right flange so you can have a more enjoyable pumping experience.